So I'm so happy that we have this really exciting salon guest tonight, and thanks entirely to Mark Powers' powers of persuasion, I suppose, and also his brainwave to invite this amazing saxophone player. And so I'm gonna let Mark, if he wishes to, and Diane do her own introduction, but I want to just start because I did find a little saxophone quote from Charlie Parker, who said, "Don't play the saxophone, let the saxophone play you." And so I have no idea if that has relevance at all to what we're going to hear tonight, but I like the idea as a person who has spent most of my life doing in the music business. I like that idea. So welcome to everyone. Welcome especially to you from all the way from Germany, where it's now late at night. Diane. So
thank you.
Mark, if you'd like to do an introduction, feel free, or we can just...
Oh, geez, now I'm back on this. Maybe I can hold it up like this. It's leaning on my wheel now. So my experience with saxophone is that my father played the baritone saxophone even in college in the marching band at Cornell. And when I was in 7th grade, he thought it would be a good idea for me to play it, because there was music in junior high school. And so I took it there, but they had no music for it. So I was kind of kicked out of the class and never played again. But I do like saxophone music, but I'm not all that, whatever. I was more interested in something else, I guess. I have familiarity with sax players and have seen some. Actually, my father was a huge big band guy. And so I don't even appreciate this, in junior high school, I got to see Stan Kenton band orchestra and all these guys who were by then playing in high school auditoriums, but I got to see all these guys, Maynard Ferguson. But anyway, so that my experience with sax. However, so this is the story. So Deanna was at the National Music Festival for 3 years and therefore was on Facebook with some Chestertown people. And every now and then she would comment on somebody that I was also friends with. And I thought she was hysterical. And I've actually never done this before, but I looked her up and she's like professor of saxophone in Syracuse. But she had 2,000 friends. So I was like, well, I'm going to just randomly friend someone I don't even know. And then she publicizes herself where she's playing, and I was traveling a lot at the time, so I got to see her live 3 times in D.C., Virginia, and Boston, with 3. Anyway, that's my story. That's how we got to know each other.
That's so true.
All right, you're on.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Mark. That is true. That's how Mark and I met, and he's pretty hilarious. I moved to the States in about 10 years ago. Originally, I just wanted to stay for 1 year and get my master's degree. But then it evolved and it turned into a doctorate at a different school, and I got a job at a college, and then I got another job and another job and another job, and suddenly it was 10 years later. And last year, I got a 1-year position at this really great conservatory in Germany. So I moved to Detmold, which is a very small town in the southernmost end of northern Germany, to teach here for 1 year. And somehow it all got entangled with Corona, and my position also got extended. So right now what I'm doing is I'm living in Germany, but I'm also teaching in the US at Syracuse University. And my life has changed a lot because, of course, concerts aren't happening. So I don't know. I'm a classical saxophonist. I love my job. I absolutely love music. I love teaching. I love traveling. And most days it just feels like I'm actually never working, but instead just having fun. And these days, while I'm having a lot more time to hike Austrian mountains and go on trips to Berlin, there are also several things that I miss a lot. For the first time since about around, maybe 2000 or something like that, I actually don't know when my next concert is going to be. Right now, it's like scheduled for February 8th, but they are thinking about canceling that too. And already my summer tour for July 2021 just got canceled this past weekend. So that's kind of a crazy situation that I'm in. So I miss meeting other musicians and working with them and playing with them, and the whole experience of working up to a concert and the social sides of before and after. I've never been alone this much, actually. I miss harmony, since saxophone is a melodic instrument. Whenever I practice for myself, there's actually a big portion of the piece just missing. So I've been doing some remote recordings projects in the last few weeks where we just layer the parts on top of one another. And one of those projects was with the Megalopolis Saxophone Orchestra that I played the first tenor saxophone in. And that was the concert that Mark attended in Boston, I believe. That was Megalopolis. And our conductor figured out the best way to order the layers to the different parts, and created a track, like a click track. And then each person added their voice on top of the click track. And I was the lucky one. It was last weekend. And not only did I have the solo part, which I didn't realize in the beginning, and it has this hauntingly beautiful and melancholic solo line, but because I also had the solo part, everybody else had already recorded their part. So I got to play in my practice room with 10 of my closest saxophone friends, and I was just literally tearing up because I got so emotional from just the joy of playing with their recordings and also terribly missing them at the same time. And doing this kind of stuff is better than not doing anything, better than not practicing and just like waiting for all of this to be over. But for me, the magic in music comes from the interaction between the musician and the reaction to one another's playing. And there's a special energy that gets created by playing great chamber music when you're feeling your fellow musicians' emotions, reading their minds sort of, and also react to one another. And that magic of music used to be part of my daily life, and it's just suddenly gone. I also miss seeing new places and traveling and meeting new people and seeing old friends around the world. Big part of traveling for me is like I have friends all over the world, and I would see them whenever I played a concert. They would come or we would meet before and after, and suddenly I'm not doing even that anymore. But this sudden stop to my normal life also made me value rest and recharging a lot more. It gave me a lot of time to think, time for my body to rest, and also to heal from strenuous saxophone playing. I had this shoulder pain that I, with physical therapy, got rid of, and I had this ear problem that I got rid of, and I don't know. And it also made me realize that maybe in the future I need to be more picky about which concerts and opportunities I need to take, to never overload myself quite that much again. So it's been an interesting couple of months for me. And today I would like to share 3, possible 4 recordings with you if time permits. And the first piece is by American composer Nico Muhly, and it's originally for viola and electronics. And Nico Muhly was just born in 1981, and he has worked with both classical and pop musicians. And when he was 22 years old and a master's student at Juilliard in New York, he began working with Philip Glass as an editor, a conductor, and a keyboardist, and continued to do so for 8 full years. And Philip Glass, if you know that name, is one of the most important American composers of minimal music. And that's an art form that employs limited or minimal musical materials. And prominent features of that are repetitive patterns, steady drones, I would say like pretty constant harmony and reiteration of musical internal processes of the music. So what you hear is non-narrative, like other music that maybe tells a story. And it wants you to focus on actually how the music is being made. And so what you hear is maybe a constant rhythm, and then one small portion of that rhythm is changing. Or maybe the harmony stays the same for a while, but then one note changes. So that your ear gets drawn to that subtle little change. And the result is that the music is not built around a melody and harmony, but rather around that changing landscape. And minimalism has been a huge trend in the US in recent years, and a lot of important composers adopted that. A couple of important names are David Lang, Louis Andriessen, Michael Torke, Julia Wolf, John Adams. He wrote a very important saxophone concerto. But to come back to Nico Muhly, he worked with Philip Glass for 8 years, so that greatly influenced his own style. Nico also collaborated with Björk on his DVD Oceania. His 2 operas have been premiered by none other than the Met and the English National Opera, so he's a pretty big name. And I've always loved his music. It was like always this kind of music that I would listen to on YouTube and on Spotify, and I just always was like so impressed by it. And I was also a little bit disappointed that besides a couple of chamber works, he never wrote a solo work for saxophone. So while I was quarantined in Germany after returning from the US in March, and I was bored out of my mind, I decided to look into his viola works. And he's written several solo viola works for Nadia Sirota. She's a very famous viola player in New York. And all of them fit about the range of the saxophone. And I always especially liked Etude 1, so I decided to try that on the saxophone, and it worked surprisingly well. At the same time, it's very challenging. As you know, a string player plays with a bow on the viola or violin or the cello. And depending on if you move the bow up or down, the tone has a very, very distinct character. And when you add to that the changes of colors that occur when the player changes the pressure or the speed with which he moves the bow, then you can imagine that on saxophone, where I just blow into the instrument, I might have trouble emulating that. But over time, I just figured out how to do these changes in color that I so desperately wanted, with just like some slight changes in air direction and pressure of the lips and the different ways to attack the notes. All of that with just listening to Nadia day in, day out, and just trying to make that happen on the instrument that I chose to play so many years ago. This piece is a lot of fun because it has electronic accompaniment. So first of all, I was in quarantine. I was practicing basically with Nadia Sirota in my ear all the time, which made me feel like I was playing with her. And then I also had the accompaniment, so I felt less alone. And the video that you're about to see, it was recorded in an empty pool hall in northern Germany. And I have headphones in because that's where I hear the accompaniment. And we didn't have large speakers at hand. So with the placement where I am in the pool hall, I'm actually relatively close to a wall, which made the audio not that nice. So what we did is we recorded the video, and then I stepped into the middle of the room and I recorded the audio. And then in post-production, I layered the video, the audio, and the accompaniment on top of one another. So let's see, this should all work fine. I'll share my screen with you. And we'll listen to just a couple minutes. I hope you all see this.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so far for a little excerpt. Thank you. The next piece I quickly want to share is something completely different. It's a piece by Robert Schumann. And Robert Schumann was a German romantic composer who, of course, didn't write for the saxophone at all because he pretty much lived before the saxophone was invented. He lived from 1810 to 1856, and the saxophone was invented in around 1840, patented in 1846. So Schumann had like about good 10 years to write for the saxophone, but he never did. And he was actually a mentor to Johannes Brahms. And just as a side note, Johannes Brahms Sonata is the main piece of my first solo CD, Deviations, which came out last year. And a fun fact, when I moved to Detmold in Germany to teach at the conservatory here, I found out that the conservatory is actually located in an old palace. And back in the day, in the late 1800s, Johannes Brahms was employed at the Prince's Palace. So he basically lived at the conservatory for 3 years that I'm currently teaching at. And Johannes Brahms' Violin Sonata is the main piece of my solo CD. So that's just a cute little weird history story. It just blows my mind sometimes when I walk through the park and I think that Johannes Brahms walked there on a daily basis too. But coming back to Schumann, Schumann wanted to be a pianist, but through unusual piano practice techniques invented by his soon-to-be father-in-law, he damaged his hand actually. And after he damaged his hand, he actually, through legal battle, married the daughter of his piano teacher and decided to become a composer. And at first, Schumann only composed for piano, but later on added works for piano and orchestra and pieces for voice and piano. He also wrote an opera and a couple of chamber works. Among those is the Adagio and Allegro. It's his Opus 70. And originally this was composed for French horn and piano in 1849. But Schumann directed that the horn part could also be performed on violin or cello, and I took the liberty to then transcribe it for the tenor saxophone. And so I did that, and then I ended up rehearsing with my pianist, and I realized that the timbre of the piano and the timbre of the tenor saxophone, which is a lot lower than what you just heard was the alto saxophone, it actually canceled out a couple of the frequencies and it wasn't able to really be heard. So I decided to alter basically the piece and take a couple things up the octave. And I've gotten so used to that actually now when I hear it in the original way, I'm so confused. So here's just a minute of that little piece. is where I took it up the octave. And the pianist that I'm playing with is my pianist. He lives in Syracuse, and he accompanies quite a bit for the school. And when he moved to Syracuse and we met, I actually fell in love with his playing just through listening to him on YouTube. And it's this beautiful friendship that came out of that still, you know, like even with me being here and him being there, we talk every couple of days on the phone. And I'm looking forward to many more projects with him. The next piece I want to sample is a piece that was written by Kevin Vialta for my quartet. I'm a member of the Mana Quartet, and that's the quartet that we were in residence in Chestertown at the National Music Festival. We had our own little saxophone festival there. It was like always a great time. I loved those 2 weeks in the summer. They were like the busiest 2 weeks I had every summer, but it was always so amazing. That energy in town with the festival going on and all the social activities and all the concerts that we had to prepare and play and go to, it was amazing. Good time. Kevin Vialta, he is a young composer. He's around 30 years old from the Southwest. And he studied at Arizona State University and the San Francisco Conservatory. And even in his extremely young career, he was commissioned already by like the Driftwood Quartet or Kronos Quartet. That's a very, very famous quartet. And then the Friction Quartet. They are kind of... they also live on the West Coast like Kronos. They are just a lot younger in generation. And Kevin Vialta, he likes to experiment with rhythm and texture. So in his piece, Portrait of My Dead Brother, he split up the melody between all 4 parts of the quartet. And then you have to jump in between the parts and have to make it work in your head, how it all fits together. And it creates this really nice effect in the group. And also it forces everybody in the quartet to really have a very, very high energy level to be up, you know, like to really be on point. And this piece is part of our Sight and Sound series, in which we ask composers to write compositions based on artwork for us, which is why I chose this sample today. And over the years, the most amazing new compositions came out of this series. A couple of examples are David Sanford. He is, I think, in Cincinnati, if I'm not wrong, Kevin. He wrote a piece based on a comic book called Kafka, and that's by Robert Crumb. And Kafka is actually a verb for people in Russia that get disappeared and suddenly are just not there anymore. And then another one of my favorites is film music by post-minimalist composer Bill Sussman that he wrote to the movie Native New Yorker by Steve Billage. That's a movie that actually won quite a few prizes, and it's very, very emotional. I mean, the first time I saw that movie, I just was so moved. It's incredible. So Steve Billage, the producer, he went to a flea market in the early 2000s and he bought a hand crank camera for like $1 or $2. And with that hand crank camera, he filmed a Native American walking through New York. Of course, to the hand cranking, it's like shaking a lot and it's black and white and the image isn't always that focused. But you see that Native American looking at monuments and walking through Central Park and riding the subway, and all of that is very interesting, but by coincidence, that also happened to be 9/11. And so by accident, the camera was pointed at the Native American standing in front of the Twin Towers from a safe distance when they were hit by the planes. And it's just so, like, even like telling you about this movie right now, I get goosebumps all over. It's just so dramatic and such an emotional documentation. And Bill Sussman, he wrote just the best music for it, for saxophone quartet to accompany the showing of the film. But the piece I'm going to play for you is called Portrait of My Dead Brother. And I'll try to share that. I looked up a picture of the painting and I'm going to share the painting with you guys. So this is Portrait of My Dead Brother. And it is by Salvador Dali. And Dali had an older brother with the same name, but that older brother died of a stomach infection when he was just 3 years old. But his entire childhood, Salvador Dali was compared to his older brother. And Dali even admitted at one time that during his childhood, he just tried to constantly kill his older brother. And one of the ways he tried to do that is he adopted a lot of weird behaviors, like extravagant behaviors, just to be different. But it didn't help. And the very first time that he says himself that he got over it is when he painted this painting that you see in front of you. You see the
you know your Word document is blocking the painting.
Oh, that is too bad. Let me try that again. Okay, so you see these dark cherries, that's dark colored cherries on the top, and then you see the light colored cherries. So the light colored cherries are actually the younger Salvador Dali, and the dark cherries are the older one, the dead one. So the dark ones fall from the sky, and they combine into this one face. And it's basically that Salvador Dali also always heard that he looked a lot like his older brother. So that's why both of those cherries together create that one face. And basically by moving the dots apart, he's trying to destroy the darker cherries. So he's trying to destroy the cherries of his brother or his brother's face. And then you see the soldiers on the bottom right. And these soldiers help pulling those cherries further apart and further destroying his older brother's face. And that gave him a lot of energy to continue with his own life. And Kevin Vielter, in his piece, he managed to sort of depict that kind of putting together of an image, but also then at the very end of the piece to sort of create that resolution that comes with, just making peace with that story of yourself. And so I'm going to play just a little of the beginning and the end of that piece for you. So I don't know how you would like to continue. It's like 35 now. We can move on to questions now, or I could show one more piece. It's up to you.
Well, maybe a little break for questions, and then we can hopefully have time for another piece. Anne texted me. She lost internet because they're working on a gas line in her neighborhood. So we lost Anne, but we're all here. So I guess anybody who has questions should speak up, but until you do, I would love to hear about how you started playing the saxophone and what sort of drew you to it. And
I actually, as long as I can remember, I always made music and I was always drawn to it. And so my mother always supported it. But it just started with like early childhood music education and then recorder and then piano. In 4th grade, I begged my parents for like 9 months to buy me a piano and let me play piano. And after 9 months, they finally relented and I started piano lessons. And then they made me play violin for 2 years because my great-grandfather had been concertmaster of the Dresden Philharmonic, so they thought that might be an instrument that I might like. And my great-grandmother, she was a concert pianist. And so these are the only 2 musicians in my family. Everybody else is business-oriented and money-oriented and much more practical than I am. And so I didn't like violin, and so I quit that. And my mom, a couple of years later, took me to a big band concert. And after that, she said, "What do you want to play, clarinet or saxophone?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I want to try it out." And as a fun story, my dad also got a doctorate, but he got his doctorate in physics. But the professor that he did his doctorate with, he also ran the university big band in my hometown. So we went to his house and he showed me both instruments and I fell in love with the saxophone and I've been playing ever since. I've tried to quit several times in between because it was just too hard. But somehow it's just, it's not the smartest choice if you want to make a living. But somehow at all those points that I wanted to quit, always something interesting happened that made me continue. The last time actually was during my doctorate at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, and that in a second language was just so incredibly hard. Like I would write papers until like 2-3 in the mornings, and my boyfriend at the time would correct them. And then I would correct them again until like 5 a.m. and would go back to school at 8 a.m. And it was just too much, but I'm glad I made it through that. But there was a point where I was like, this is like not worth it. I'm not sure I ever need this doctorate to do anything in my life. I want to quit. And I had this moment where I was crying in a cafe and telling my boyfriend I'm quitting. And he said, okay, it's fine. We can figure it out. We'll figure out something else for you to do. And I was like so relieved, and I walked home and I opened up my laptop and it said that I had won first prize in a competition and was invited to play in Carnegie Hall. And he just looked at me, he smiled, and he said, well, you can't quit now. So somehow fate had it that I always continued, and that always when I thought nothing is happening, some good thing came around the corner. So I've always continued. I haven't regretted that choice yet, and I love every day that I get to make music, talk about music, or play music.
Yeah, I know a musician that I used to work with who did a lot of teaching. The students or often their parents would say, well, shouldn't buy the backup plan, or, go to school and get a degree in something else, and then just in case music doesn't work out. And he would always say, no, the only way that you should go into music is if you have no other choice. If you need to do it so much that's the only thing you can do, then you should do it. If there's anything else that you might do instead, that's what you should do, and let music be a hobby.
Yeah, I was actually influenced like that too. My parents were, my dad always said that I'm too strong-willed, so rather than be against me, he would support me. Mm-hmm. But they were strongly for me studying music ed and just having that regular income in the mornings and then do my fun stuff in the afternoon. So I actually, last minute, I did this sort of pre-study at the Berlin Conservatory while I was still in school. I would travel there, that's like 3-4 hours from my hometown. I would travel there every couple of weeks on the weekend to take lessons there. And it was like already set in stone that I would go study there and get my performance degree. But sort of last minute, I pulled out and I went to Hamburg instead and studied 2 years of music education, which was really great for me in terms of, it's just a very, very broad education. And I think I needed that foundation for my life. But once I had my first internship in school, I just realized that's totally not what I want to do. I just wanted to practice my saxophone all day. And I switched schools and I switched degrees. But yeah. There are a lot of easier ways to make money than play an instrument, let alone classical saxophone, which is such a niche thing in the classical music world anyway. I mean, I'm constantly still fighting for people to accept that that's a valid classical instrument.
Yes.
I have a question. You referred to transposing. Do you also do your own original compositions? Are you...
I've started to. I've started to, and it came out of improvising, which I like a lot, and which I do a lot with my students, that I make them improvise, sometimes to artwork, sometimes to a topic. And so, like, whenever I start practicing, I do that myself. And somebody said to me, you know, if you have a good beginning, you should just try to memorize that and then try to play that again next day. And slowly I've come up with something that could resemble a piece, but I'm at no point yet where I think I should share that with the world. So I will explore that a little bit more. It is certainly a good way to get to know my saxophone and to get to know myself. And then maybe in a couple of years there will be a Diane Hunger original.
Well, maybe now would be a good time to listen to the third piece that you had. Did you have another piece?
Yeah, I have another piece. And that is a piece that was composed for me a couple years ago by American composer Mark Mellitz. He's also a post-minimalist composer, like Nico Muhly. And he currently lives in Chicago. Yeah, he lives in Chicago.
Would you be able to give us like a 30-second definition of post-minimalist?
Okay, that is like a minimalist music where you have the same pattern and the same harmony and one thing changes. And post-minimalist is basically the same thing, besides that they don't want you to hear the form of the piece. And they also are more influenced by pop music or by gamelan music. So you hear that sort of pop influence or rock influence sometimes in that style. Post-minimalism is a lot more like just open to other things than minimalism is just more classical music.
Thank you.
So Mark Mellitz and we both studied at the Eastman School of Music in Rochester. Of course, at different times. He's a lot older than I am. And then he lived for a long time in Syracuse, New York. And then he moved away and I started teaching there at the university. He studied also at Cornell. And for a little bit, I taught at Cornell. And then one of his biggest influences on him was Stephen Stuckey, who unfortunately and untimely passed away of cancer. He was an American composer. And Stephen Stuckey I met during my doctorate, and I've worked with him quite a bit because he composed a piece called Notturno, and he changed my music making quite a bit. And then Mark and I both heavily involved in the Society for New Music in Syracuse. Of course, Mark's compositions are often played there, and I often perform with them there. And Mark is also a founding member of the Common Sense Composers Collective. I don't know if you've heard of that term, but it's a collective that tries to find different ways of working with musicians. And so often they have an ensemble in residence each year, and each composer writes for that group, and they like work with the group and specialize it for the group, and then find grants and stuff like that to actually record that piece. And last year, Mana, my quartet, was the ensemble in residence with Common Sense. And so we've premiered 3 or 4 of those works. We were supposed to premiere the rest of them this summer. All of that got canceled. And we do have funding to record all of these pieces. So hopefully that will happen sometime this year. But a couple of years ago, somebody asked if they could commission a piece for me from Mark Mallets. I mean, that's something that doesn't come around every day, so I was floored. And I started working with Mark. And Mark loves electric guitar, and in recent years he's tried to adapt that to different instruments. So Nadina Mackie-Jackson, she is a Canadian bassoonist, like the Canadian bassoonist there is. She's always a little bit underground and grungy, and she does a lot of very interesting things. And Mark wrote her a piece where he like amplifies the sound and like makes it sound super rocky. It's like, if you're interested in that, you should go listen to that on YouTube later. It's really an awesome piece. And so Mark decided that for me, instead of working with amplifiers and stuff like that, he wanted to work with a looping station. And they make these looping pedals, and you can record yourself, and then you can play it back over the speaker. And Mark composed the piece, and what came out was a piece that needed at least 12 pedals. And these things get super big, they get super heavy, very, very, very expensive. And I just thought all of that is kind of a no-go, especially if you want to have students play that piece, because they could never, ever afford such a pedal. And then it would be horrible to travel. Like for me, traveling is all about minimalism. I like to pack very, very light because I always have to schlep my saxophones. All of my sheet music is actually on this little iPad. And I have a pedal with it. I stopped traveling with sheet music ages ago when it just got too heavy to lug that around, and then you would forget a piece, and it was like always this very, very stressful thing if you had all your sheet music. And now even if my students forget their music, I can just say, honey, you just didn't practice because I have it right here. So it's like, that's just me. I love my life easy. And so I just told Mark it's not possible, and he said, you need to find a way. And so I did some digging, and I found a looping app, actually, that's on my iPad. And you can loop up to 15 loops or something like that on that little app on your iPad. And of course, it wasn't that easy to make it work with the saxophone. But over time, and a lot of trial and error, and a lot of phone conversations with Mark, I figured it out. And if I attach a clip-on microphone to the bell of my saxophone, I can, over a camera connector kit, just for a normal, like just a photo camera, I can actually get the sound onto the iPad, loop it in the looping app, then connect it with an audio interface. The audio interface I can connect to speakers, which then plays it out to the hall, but also connect headphones to it so that I can actually hear it too, because the speakers are facing the front, so that there is no interaction between the app and the speakers. The problem is with the app that it is made for easy music, and it always has set loop lengths. So you have to change the loop length if you want to adapt it. So I had to figure out a way to play this piece while changing time, changing the meter of the piece, and changing the loop length, all while playing the saxophone. And it was like hilarious. It was amazing. I had so many funny moments in the practice room. But in the end, it all worked out, and this amazing piece came about. And he named it after my last name, so he called it Hunger, and thought he was being hilarious himself. And I'll just play the beginning of that. And the recording that I'm going to show you, that's in the concert hall from Syracuse, which used to be a chapel. And it's really this amazing, really amazing hall. And I played it live in a couple of concerts. I think, Mark, you were at the premiere of this, right? In Virginia?
Yes, I was.
Nice.
And then I asked you to record it for months.
Yes, and I played it at several concerts, but it's like not that easy to record in a concert because like so many things can go wrong with the app. So I realized I had to record it. It was the end of the semester, which is always the busiest time in the concert hall. And so the only time I got was 3 a.m. So between 3 and 4 a.m., I recorded this piece that you're about to hear, which is why it's so dark in the hall. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Thank you. That piece and the piece by Nicky Muley, they are actually two of the works that are going to be on my next CD, which will be hopefully available sometime next year. And due to Corona, it will be mostly works for saxophone and electronics or solo works, which will be easy to record no matter what happens in the world in the next months. So I'm working on funding for that, and I'm sure it's going to work out one way or the other. And the CD will be called Hunger.
would you mind sharing links with us to the videos you've shared today? Because I know there are people who couldn't attend who would really like to hear the variety of music you play. I mean, it's so, I felt like the first one was so happy, and then there was such the melody, and the second one was so melodic, and then this last one was just amazing with the looping pedal. So it was really fun to hear all of the different expressions.
Thank you. Yeah, I can send those links later. That's no problem at all.
Yeah.
I feel like it's probably time. I mean, does anybody have any other questions or, burning things to ask Diana before we sign off and do a toast for our evening? We good? Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I mean, it's really been a pleasure and just like a real joy to hear you today. It's been very different than what we've had in the salon before. And hearing you talk at the beginning about your feelings about performing and solitude and coronavirus, we're very touching and reminded us, that we're all experiencing different things, but it was really nice to hear it from your perspective. And I think, one of the things that I wrote down at the very end was just your improvisation and thinking about improvising in relation to something else, a story, some artwork, makes me think about some ideas for RiverArts. And I just love that brings, all the different types of arts together. So thank you for sharing your time and your talent with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was amazing. I had so much fun.
Well, and it's coming up on midnight where you are, is that correct?
Yep, but it's not a problem. I am a night owl, and I've already walked my dog, so I don't have to go out again. It's all good.
Sounds great. And Mark, thank you for bringing Diana to us today.
Indeed.
We will share this with our members, and we'll let the National Music Festival know. And we got in touch with them, and I know everybody's working on different time schedules and from different places right now. And so I think some of them will be very disappointed that they've missed it. And we will let folks know how they can hear what you've shared today and then where they can find your music for sale and all of those things. So I say we end as you're approaching a new day there in Germany, just with a toast to improvisation. Thank you.
Thank
you. Thank you very much. And thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
This is like the Wawa of the Middle West, or Royal Farms, Midwest. It's okay.
Safe travels, Mark. And Diana, safe travels to you when you start traveling again. And just hearing you talk makes us all long for those days.
Yep.
Yes.
Me too. Well, stay safe, stay healthy.
You too.
And hopefully
thank you so much. It was really nice to meet you this way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.